illustrated by Rosalind Tordesillas and Oliver Maines.
From steamy romance novels to feel-good Hollywood rom-coms, our culture is saturated with rosy representations of love and intimacy. But all too often, our own love lives fail to meet these lofty ideals. So is there something wrong with us? Well, not necessarily. We may just be looking for love in all the wrong ways. But there is a way to change this. These blinks explore how romantic relationships work in the real world and present a practical approach to building strong and stable bonds that won't lose their spark. Based on the clinical expertise of Alexandra H. Solomon, this guide shows us how finding love starts with understanding ourselves, our needs, and the unique patterns that shape our relationships.
Blink 1 of 8.
Meet Alexia. At 26 years old, this young woman is starting to get into the swing of adult life. She's got a good job, a nice apartment, and a stable group of friends. But her love life is faltering. She's always dating men that leave her frustrated. One is too clingy, the next is aloof, another only cares about work. Now, it'd be easy to say these men are simply duds. But Alexia bears some responsibility as well. After all, she's the one picking them. If Alexia wants to forge a more fulfilling match, she'll have to examine her own beliefs and behaviors about love. The process of discovering how and why we love others is called relational self-awareness, and it's fundamental to any successful partnership.
The key message here is, to truly love another, you must first understand yourself.
Every relationship is a collaboration between two people. Each partner contributes their own unique mix of qualities. When you date someone, you confront that person's personality, habits, and expectations about love. But your character and quirks also shape the union. In order to build a strong and stable pairing, you have to understand your own personality, needs, and desires. You must have relational self-awareness. Cultivating relational self-awareness often means looking backward. We learn a lot about love as children. Specifically, we learn from watching our parents and experiencing our own family dynamics. These early experiences shape how we approach intimacy as adults. If you had cold, distant parents, you might settle for a partner who is neglectful. Or you might overcompensate and desire unrealistic levels of attention. Of course, these patterns aren't permanent. You can consciously adjust them with introspection and effort. One technique the author recommends is the name, connect, choose method. To practice this, first, identify which relationship patterns you've learned from your parents. Next, consider how these early lessons may inform your current behaviors. Then, with this insight, actively work to overcome the habits you find harmful. When you reflect deeply on yourself and your history, you can start to better understand your core issues. Core issues are the personal vulnerabilities or soft spots that guide our intimate relationships. Your core issues may include a fear of abandonment, need for approval, or a recurring distrust of others. These can be difficult to confront, but once you do, you'll be more able to grapple with their effects. We'll look at some proactive ways to approach these issues in the next blink.
Blink 2 of 8.
Owen and Letitia got along perfectly. That is, until Owen forgot to pick up the car from the mechanic. This uncharacteristic, small slip-up sent Letitia into a frenzy. She screamed, she yelled, she even called Owen names. she became a completely different person. Why did such a tiny mistake have such a big impact? Well, it has to do with Letitia's life story. You see, Letitia was raised by a single mother who put a lot of emphasis on personal responsibility. If young Letitia ever blundered, she received harsh lectures. Later, as an adult, she saw any error as a serious issue and began playing the role of a strict parent. What could Letitia do differently? Well, with a little self awareness, she might see Owen slip up in a different light and learn to play a new role.
The key message here is to change your mindset, tell yourself better and more accurate stories.
Whether consciously or not, we all understand our lives through the lens of stories. And just like any fairy tale, these stories have characters, settings, themes, and plots. The stories we tell ourselves and the roles we cast ourselves in have a powerful impact on how we interact with the people we love. But these stories aren't always true, and often we repeat the same tales without realizing it. So, what story was Letitia telling herself when Owen forgot to pick up the car? It was a story she'd learned as a little girl. In this tale, any mistake was unacceptable. When Owen messed up, she immediately cast him as a careless, worthless person, just as her mother would have cast her. But imagine if Letitia saw a different story, one where Owen was a kind, compassionate partner who'd had a tough day and a single lapse in memory. Armed with this narrative, Letitia could probably react more calmly. Stories that are less black and white and more nuanced are called dialectic stories. In a dialectic story, Owen can be both forgetful and a good partner, and Letitia can feel mad and disappointed, but also understanding and forgiving. Telling dialectic stories is useful because they more accurately represent reality and leave room for the characters to control and adjust their behavior. You're constantly growing and changing, as are the people and circumstances around you. So, it's important to keep updating your internal stories with new, more accurate information. When this happens and you acknowledge the shifts, you can adapt accordingly. And when you're open to new stories, you can guide your life toward a happier ending.
Blink 3 of 8.
Imagine you're a 25-year-old single woman living in a big American city. For many people these days, this is living the dream. You're young, you're free, and you can spend your week pursuing your career and your weekends partying with your friends. But if you travel back in time 100 years, you'll get a completely different story. In 1920, a 25-year-old bachelorette might feel anxious or stigmatized. She might be receiving lots of pressure to get married and have children before it's, quote, too late. The truth is, how we approach love is mostly determined by the cultural norms around us. To find an authentic approach to love, it's important to critically examine these outside forces.
The key message here is your love life doesn't have to match cultural standards.
No matter where and when you're living, you're always thoroughly entangled in a wider cultural context. This culture is full of messages about how dating, relationships, and love should work. Sometimes the messages are explicit, such as with religious doctrines. But just as often, the rules of love are subtly built into community norms or represented in media like books, TV, and movies. And these cultural expectations don't always align with our authentic selves or desires. For instance, contemporary culture presents specific ideas about how each gender should act. Women are expected to be emotional, family-oriented, and looking for commitment, while men are supposed to be stoic, career focused, and independent. But any given individual is unlikely to fit into these tightly prescribed boxes. This is true for everyone, and especially relevant for people in the LGBT community who may have a more critical approach to gender norms. Culture can also give us unrealistic ideas about relationships in general. Institutions like Hollywood tend to present an idealized version of romance, where passion trumps all. But in reality, partnerships involve a lot of work, compromise, and even boredom. So people seeking some picture perfect love story can find themselves disappointed and all too willing to give up at the slightest rough patch. When pursuing a relationship, don't take cultural norms as sacred. Carefully consider whether you actually agree with them. You may find some are useful and others are not. Perhaps you're a woman who likes sensitive men. Or you're a man who would rather skip the office and be a stay-at-home dad. These types of choices are ultimately up to you.
Blink 4 of 8.
Do you believe in soulmates? This can be a tough question, especially since there's no single definition for what a soulmate is. For some people, a soulmate is like the Yiddish concept bashert. A bashert is your ideal match, the person God created specifically for you. For others, a soulmate is like a fellow traveler, and a relationship only emerges through spending years and years together. For others still, a soulmate is like a wake-up call. It's the person who reinvigorates your love of life, even if just for a brief moment. Some of these conceptions of soulmates will resonate more with you than others. But one thing is true regardless, and that's that no relationship is free of hurdles. To form a lasting relationship, you'll need to put in the work, even with your soulmate.
The key message here is, no partner will completely fulfill all your needs all the time.
When we seek a romantic partner, there's sometimes an expectation that this person will be our ideal match in every way. But this lofty ideal can be dangerous. In fact, according to a study on couples by social psychologists Spike W.S. Lee and Norbert Schwartz, people who believe in perfect matches are more likely to be disappointed and dissatisfied in their relationships.